History Project. My name is Joe Bruckner, B-R-U-C-K-N-E-R. I also have Tony Hilliard and Francis Westbrook. We're all volunteers with the Atlanta History Center. And Mr. Hipps, Gerald Lamar Hipps, and his lovely wife, Beverly June Hipps. And we're honored to have both Mr. and Miss Hipps with us today. Mr. Hipps, could you give us your complete name, please?
Yes, I can. My complete name is Gerald Lamar Hipps.
Okay. And when and where were you born?
I was born in Miami, Florida in the year 1926.
And what is your current address?
My current address, 540 Barnes Mountain Road, Mansfield, Georgia.
Well, we're honored to have you with us today, and we appreciate you coming in. Would you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and your family?
Yes, I would love to. When I was a little kid, there was days that I went hungry. We had no electricity. Everybody else on my street had electricity, but we did not have it. We had to use those old-fashioned lanterns. And the days that I went hungry, I just didn't know what I was going to do. And my sister, my oldest sister, she had a boyfriend, and her father raised strawberries. They had a bunch of strawberries, and so he would give my sister strawberries, so that would be food for us. So then, after that, I thought that I would really get in the Marine Corps, and I would make money and send my allotment to my mother, because she raised me, my grandmother raised me. But as I was young, really, I went with no shoes, and I had patches in my pants, but I wasn't ashamed. I still went to school. And so then as time went on, and I became 16 years old, I wanted to join the Marine Corps. And when I joined the Marine Corps, they told me I had to wait either 3 months or 6 months, I don't remember which, and get sworn in Orlando, Florida.
How old were you at the time?
I was 16. I was 16 years old. My mother lied about my age, and that was the only way I could get in. At first she said she wasn't going to lie about my age, but I says, please, Mother, I says, I gotta go fight in the war to defend my country, because they bombed Pearl Harbor. And so when they told me I had to wait 6 months before I could get sworn in, I had to get a job, because I'm not a freeloader. I wasn't a freeloader when I was a kid. And so I went down to this big ship, and I told the captain on that big ship, I said, please give me a job. I'll go overseas and help you take supplies to the war zone. And the man looked at me and he says, I can't give you a job. He says, because you're too young. And I said, no, I'm not too young. So then I says, okay. So then I left there and went to where they was making PT boats. And then I liked that, because they was neat. And so I worked the whole day, and one guy, I'll never know his name, but he called me a bad name. And I don't want nobody to call me a bad name, so I cold-cocked him. I hit him as hard as I could, and I got caught. And then when I got caught, they fired me. So I said, okay. So then, pretty soon, I was able to go to boot camp. So I went, got sworn in Orlando, Florida. And then they put me on a bus, and they took me into boot camp, and they shaved all my hair off. They took my clothes I had on, gave me shoes that was too big for me, and the clothes was really oversized, but I wore them. I didn't complain about it. And so I went ahead, and whatever they would do, I would do it. But then sometimes it was hard for me to obey orders, because I was real cocky when I was 16 years old. So they went ahead, and this one guy, my drill instructor, he looked at me and looked at all the guys there, and he says, I want to tell you all something right now. He says, I'm your drill instructor, and I'm going to teach you something about this weapon. And he says, I don't want nobody to utter a word. So I'm sitting there looking around, listening to him. And this here buddy of mine behind me, he tapped me on the shoulder. He says, ask the drill instructor if the smoking lamp is lit. They called smoking cigarettes back in those days. So I said, okay. So I raised my hand up like a little kid and I said, sir, is the smoking lamp lit? He says, lad, come up here. I went up there and he says, didn't I tell you not to utter a word? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, why did you utter a word? And I said, well, I just did. And because I wouldn't tell him that, my buddy asked me that. So then what happened? He says, okay. He says, what I want you to do, he says, I want you to put your full winter clothes on and bring your rifle up and hold your hand out like that. So I held my hand out like that and he put that rifle across my hand and I had to squat. And I had to stay there at least, I would say, a long time until I couldn't hold it no more. So he says, I'm gonna let you go this time, but he says, tonight, he says, we're gonna call you a Goonie bird. So he said, we was living in these big old wide barracks and they had open lofts up there, rafters. And they said to me, he says, you're gonna sing all night long, but he told me I had to get naked first. And I said, man, I can't get naked in front of all. He says, when you take showers, you get naked in front of all your buddies. Whatever you do, you're naked. And I said, yeah, but I won't be sitting up in rafters. So he says, you will tonight. So there I was, sitting up in the rafters, singing, I'm a Goonie bird from Buford. I'm a Goonie bird from Buford, all night long. And then later, while I was in boot camp, before I could get out, I had to work in the mess hall, peeling potatoes. So I said, I don't like peeling potatoes. You're gonna peel potatoes. The potatoes were stacked up as high as this room. And there I was, had to sit there and peel potatoes. So then I'm looking around and saying to myself, I don't like peeling potatoes. So I'd peel a potato, then I'd look, then I'd throw the potato against the wall, playing like it was a ball. So I did that quite a few times. So I didn't mind it too bad. I'd peel a potato, put it in the pile, then I'd pick up another one, throw it up against the wall. I got caught. And boy, when I got caught, boy, I was really in for it. He said, man, he says, you haven't learned how to obey orders yet. And I said, I will learn how to obey orders, sir. I said, don't punish me no more. So he said, well, for doing that, he said, take all your clothes off, put this rope around your stomach, and I'm giving you this here pole with a nail in the pole, and you're gonna go along picking up cigarette butts and looping them over into your pants, into your rope. And I said, well, I did because I had to, you know. So then he told me that I had to dance and play like I was a hula girl. And I said, I was no hula girl. Then I said, man, to myself, that's my drill instructor, and if I could ever get him on the front lines, if I ever go to war, I'll get even. Well, it didn't happen because he was teaching me what to do. And I love this man to this day, even though he mistreated me in a lot of ways and all of us, he taught me how to defend myself. And he said, always remember, Semper Fidelis means kill or be killed. And he put that in my head. So I says, okay, I will kill or be killed because I wanted to come back. So then, finally, I'm in San Diego, California, and they put me on this big ship with all of us other Marines, and we went to Hawaii. We went to Hilo, Hawaii to do some more training. So while we was going there to do more training, I went through Pearl Harbor and I saw with my own eyes all them sunken ships. And man, that just hurt me very much. I mean, because a lot of people got killed then. So then, we stayed there for about a day, I guess. And then they went ahead and we went on the, stayed on the ship and we went farther. We didn't know where we was going. We had no idea where we was going. It was top secret. So then after I'm on board the ship for about 6 or 7 days, I get a call to go downstairs, down someplace down. They don't call it stairs in the Navy or Marines. I went down and they had this big monument made on a table of Iwo Jima. And they gave us instructions on what we was going to do, what company was going here and what company was going there. So then I looked it over real good and I knew what I had to do. I knew when I hit that beach that I had to go capture Mount Suribachi. So then I had a big buddy of mine that I thought he was going to be with me all this time. And he went ahead and took a pistol and blowed his thumb off. And that kept him from invading the first day. He went in later on, but not the first day when I really needed help. And so then, okay, so I'm on board ship and I get out there and all of a sudden I hear this, they're singing this song. It was Tokyo Rose. She was saying, all you guys that's in the service, your wives are back home, they catting around, and here you are wanting to go to war. And not only that, the Marines have landed on Iwo Jima and we have defeated them. Tokyo Rose said that. I looked at my buddy and I says, no. I said, we haven't even gotten there yet. So finally we pulling up there to Iwo. And just before we got there, we had this here big breakfast. They said, I'm gonna give you guys steak and eggs for breakfast. I never had steak and eggs before my whole life for breakfast. And they said that might be your last one. I fooled them. It wasn't my last one. And so then we got on these here, we had to climb down this here big rope off of this big ship to get on these little landing crafts. And you had to keep your hands on the side of the rope coming down, or if you put them the other way coming down, they'd get stepped on. So then finally I got in the landing craft. And all of the guys on board ship, on this little landing craft, we squatted down, full gear on, ready to attack. And this here Navy, I think they called him a coxswain. He was driving this LST. He had a helmet on, but he had to hold his head straight up. He had a little shield across like that. But he was an easy target. And I'll always admire that man that brought me in. So finally, I hit that beach. And when I hit that beach, I saw all of those dead Marines, because I came in, I don't know what wave, the 20th, the 30th wave, I don't know. And I saw all the dead Marines on the beach trying to get up this here little dirt, this little hill. And I'm up there, and when I saw all the dead Marines, blood everywhere, their faces in the dirt, and man, it scared the holy you-know-what out of me. I got scared. So I jumped in a foxhole, and man, I was going to stay in that foxhole. I wasn't going to get out. And what do you think happened? I heard a voice, and this voice says, lad, you're not afraid, are you? I looked up, and it was my Colonel Johnson. And I forgot his real name, but I wrote it down on my letter. And So I looked up at him and I said to myself, that man is important. We can't lose a colonel. Losing me would be just a peon, because that's what I was, a peon. And I went ahead and when I saw him, it gave me the guts to go. And then, about that time, I got wounded on the beach. I had shrapnel wounds in my arm, I had shrapnel wounds in my shoulder, and and my leg, and my Navy corpsman, his name was John Bradley. His son later wrote the book, Flags of Our Fathers. And he doctored me up with sulfur. And he put this sulfur around on my wounds, bandaged me up, and he sent me on my way. Okay, my company is already going ahead of me. And I didn't realize it until about, I get a letter from my from my captain, and he ended up being a colonel, Dave Severin in California. And I asked him a few questions, and he told me, he says, you got lost from your company for 3 days. I did not realize that it took me 3 days and combat trying to find my company. So then I went ahead and I found my company, and about that time we raised the flag on Suribachi. And when the flag was raised, everybody yelled and cheered and everything else. And I'm saying, oh boy, I can go home now, because our job was to secure Mount Suribachi.
Raise one flag. And
Yeah, but we wasn't supposed to. I mean, we didn't know nothing about raising no flag. They just found a pole up there and they planted a flag, and then they brought another flag from the ship and they raised that. And I'm right there with them. So then I thought we was going to go home. So then they was unloading all these here supplies was coming in, and everything was being unloaded. And me and two other guys, one guy on each side of me, was walking on the beach before we could find out what our orders was going to be. And there was a Japanese sniper, I didn't know, was under a poncho over there on my left side. And as we passed him, he raised up and he shot my buddy on the left. I did not get shot. If I was the sniper, I would have shot at the man that was in the middle. So I did not get shot. So finally, I found out that we had to go up to the northern end for more fighting. And while I was going up on the northern end fighting, I went ahead and I saw my Colonel Johnson. He was blown to pieces. Because what happened, a Navy mortar shell or a gunshot or a bomb or whatever landed short, didn't go where it was supposed to go, and it killed him. And I saw it with my own eyes. And then by saying that, it scared me again, you know. And in fact, I think that I was scared the whole time. And I do believe that if I ever talked to another serviceman or a Marine or a warrior, if he said he was never afraid, I know that he wouldn't be telling me the truth. So then, my captain, he went ahead and he told me to go get this here wounded man that was down in a hole down there. And I went down there, and when I went down there to bring him back to safety, we was attacked by a Japanese machine gun fire. Bullets was flying every which way. Couldn't escape it. So he sent a flamethrower down there. And I don't know if you ever saw a flamethrower or not, but boy, they shoot that flame a long ways, and everybody respects that flamethrower. So He sent that flamethrower down there, and I was able to get back safety. So then here I am. I go up into another little section there, and so I had to dig in for the night. In a foxhole, you have two guys sleeping in a foxhole, and you have a watch. So one would say, or I would say, you go ahead and you sleep for 3 hours, and then I will sleep for 3 hours, and we will do this watch until daybreak. So then we did that, and during that night, or just before night, about 12 feet away from me was another foxhole with two guys in it. One of those guys did not have a watch. So you know what I did? Me and my buddy, both of us had a watch. So I gave him my watch. Well, during the night, he got killed. The man that I gave the watch to. And that ended my watch, because I couldn't get my watch back because the man got killed and they hauled him off. So then, okay. So then I go back, I'm going back, and to get more orders. And I looked down there. When I looked down there and I saw this dead Marine, he had his hands stretched out like that, and I saw a watch on his wrist. And I'm saying to myself, he don't need that watch. I will get that watch. And so I reached down, got a hold of the watch. So, okay, I got a watch now. So then what happened? We get up, and my captain, he had us all grouped together, give us instructions. And he looked around. There must have been about, more than a squad. There was about 20 of us. And he says, one of you guys took a watch off of a dead Marine, and that watch belonged to his family. And he said, well, what you do? He says, you go ahead, whoever did it, put that watch back behind that big old boulder, and nothing else will ever be said. So I took my watch off my wrist, and I put it back behind that boulder. And nothing else was ever said. And I know that I'm going to jump the gun just a little bit, but I want to say this captain of mine ended up being a colonel. And he wrote me a letter about, I guess about 6 years ago. And he says, are you the Hipps that was in my outfit when we raised the flag? He says, if so, please acknowledge this letter. And if not, I'm sorry to have inconvenienced you. So I wrote him a letter back, and I said, yes, I was the Hipps in your outfit. So then we've been corresponding ever since. Now getting back to the war, I looked up at God, and I says, please God, get me out of this mess. I says, please get me out of this mess. And I said, it's terrible. And I said, I will go to church every Sunday of my life. And that bothered me for a long time, because I did not go to church every Sunday. And several preachers told me he understood. So we went back there fighting the war. And it would take us a long time just to advance 100 yards, 200 yards, because the island was so small. I think it was only about 7 miles long. I don't know, but it's something like that. It wasn't long. And when we would fight, the Japs was back in those caves, and they was very sneaky. You know, they'd come out, they'd shoot, and we'd have to go in the caves and get them, or throw grenades and stuff in there to get them. So one time, I'm walking past a cave, and the Japanese people in there, they must have poured some gas on this one Marine they captured, set him on fire, and pushed him out of the cave. And he yelled one time, and then he hit the ground. He was dead. And it just, man, it was horrible. And there's been so many cases like that, that once you've been in war, you know you've been in war, and you never forget it. And so, just like I told, just like my wife said the other day, she said, I have nightmares. Not every night, but once in a while I'll have nightmares and I'm dreaming of the enemy, you know. And I'm saying mostly, get off the beach. You don't want to stay on the beach. Get off the beach, you'll get killed. And I was having nightmares saying that, and my wife would wake me up, and then everything would be okay until the next morning. Everything would be all right. And things like that would happen quite a bit. And even to this day, nobody can't come back behind me and touch me, because I'll turn around and I'm very jumpy, and I'll turn around. I had a salesman back, about 6 months ago. Marshall was his name, a car salesman, and he touched me, and I almost hit him. And he says, Mr. Hipps, he says, I will never do that to you again. And I said, well, I can't help it. And he says, he understood, you know. So then, during the war, we up there fighting on the northern end, and all of a sudden, we had the Japanese pinned down. They couldn't go nowhere unless they go into the ocean, because we was at the end of Iwo Jima. And then we get word that the I don't know if I got the word then and there. No, then and there, I prayed to God. I said, please God, let me go home. And about that time, about an hour later, we got word that we could go home, that the Army was going to come in and relieve us. So then all of us had our weapons, marching back, and in the meantime, the Japanese enemy, they scooped around us. We didn't know where they was at. And they slipped in at this place where they had all of these here pilots and airplanes and so forth. And they slipped in there and they killed all the pilots that was in there. I guess they must have captured the guards, because everybody has to have a guard if you're sleeping. So then we come on back, and I got on board ship, and even on board ship.
Before you got on ship, you stepped on a live line.
Yeah, well.
And also the circle where the man got
Yeah.
killed.
Yeah, I want to tell you also this. I stepped on a live bomb, and when I realized I stepped on a live bomb, I got as light as a feather. It didn't go off. It didn't go off. And man, I'll tell you, I was really blessed. Yeah, I was really blessed. And what was that, honey, you said?
The circle of men where the
Oh yeah,
bomb dropped
there
in
was
the
a
water.
circle. While we was on the northern end, we was getting orders. We was in a circle. I guess there's about, I don't know how many of us was in a circle. 14, 15, I don't know. There's some kind of a bomb dropped into the circle. And half the guys got killed. And I was smelling smoke. And it was horrible. And
You couldn't see.
yeah, and I couldn't see, and I found out later on, when I went to the VA asked me a stupid question. They said, what kind of a bomb was it that landed in this circle? And I told them, I said, I did not know the type of a bomb. All I knew, it was a bomb. And then they also said this I didn't like, but they corrected it before. They said, I was wounded in action, combat no. And I'm saying to my wife, how can I be wounded in action and combat no? So the VA corrected that. They took that off the files. And then, like I told you, that I was told I was could go home. We finally get on board the ship, and down there by every entryway they had a red light. I don't know if it said exit on it or what, but when you go through that door, you had to close it and turn the latch. So during the night, I'm having a nightmare. And I have my BAR. And I'm dreaming that the Japs are coming after me. And about that time, one of the Marines was on board the ship. He was having a nightmare, and he was running down the hallway. And man, I'm raising up with my BAR and in my dream, and I was about ready to kill him. And it would have been awful if I killed him, but I came to my senses in time. So finally, when we got off of that ship, we went back to Hawaii, Maui, Hawaii. And we had our training camp there, and we was training to invade Japan. And I was prepared. I was ready to invade Japan. And about that time, we get word that the Japanese people have surrendered because they dropped that bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And what makes me so sad too, our president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, he died about a week before the war was over. And he would have loved to saw that about the war. And I wrote all of this down as my story. And I just don't know, but my sons and my grandsons and everybody will know this. And I wrote down at the bottom of this letter, I have been in hell and saw the horror of war. I still have nightmares after all these years. God felt the need to bring me home safe. And that is my story.
That's an amazing story. How many days were you in combat on Iwo?
On Iwo, I would say 36 days. 36 days. It took that long. It took that long to secure Iwo Jima. And all I could hear every day, it was loud noise, thunder, and light, like lightning. It wasn't lightning, it was just the flash of lights, you know, by the guns and all of that. And at nighttime, my wife gets scared whenever the lightning happens. And I tell her, I said, you should have been in the war with me. And you would be able to accept the lightning easy. And so God had gave me a good reason to be here. And I think the good reason is when I go give speeches, the first thing I will tell the kids when I go to the schools and tell them, I'll say the first thing, don't do. I said, don't smoke, don't drink, don't take drugs, and keep away from bad people. I says, if you're around bad people, they're going to get you in trouble. And I say, don't do those things. If you got to do some, don't do many of them, and then live a good life. And I think God meant for me to tell them that, and then I will then tell them this story. And
well, that's a great message, and it means a lot to them coming from somebody
Yeah.
who's been through what you've been through.
yeah,
They all know him as Papa, wherever he goes
Yeah.
to school.
And,
Wow.
He's known as Papa.
to this day, I don't know why, but I have bet you that I've got at least 20 different people from Wyoming, California, all over the country, asking for my autograph. And and that makes me feel good. And I will send them a picture of me and a story that was in the paper. I had on I think it was Veterans Day or Memorial Day or one day. I had my story. I had my story in two. I had my story in two of the papers. I couldn't understand why I was in two of the papers. Well, the reason why my story got in the paper was I went to Kroger's to get some groceries, and as I was coming out of Kroger's, this man approached me. I was waiting for the wife to come out with her groceries, and this man approached me because he saw in the back of my truck Iwo Jima Survivor, and he said, "Was you on Iwo?" I said, "Yes, sir, I was on Iwo." He said, "My name is Blassingame." And I said, "Blassingame?" I says, "That was my wife's maiden name, Blassingame." And I said, "Give me your phone number or something." And he says, "No," he says, "you will hear from me." So the next day I get this here call for an interview to two of the papers, my Newton Citizen in Covington and the Covington News, in which I made copies and I send those stories to everybody who wants my story. And I can talk about my stories now, and I can talk about what I went through, but sometimes it's rough. But that's okay. That's okay. And I was told that it would be good for me to get it out of my system, but you can't get it all out of your
We
system.
have 3 sons that 2 of them went
Yeah.
through Vietnam and really suffered. And
Yeah.
went through hell like you did.
And
And the other one was on his way
yeah,
to go, and by God's will, he didn't have to go.
yeah.
And you've been very lucky to be in whole shape.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
so are your sons, but they are
Yeah.
messed up with the nightmares and the dreams, the tapping of the
Yeah.
feet, tapping of the hands for no reason.
To this
And
day,
nervousness.
to this day, my wife has to sleep with a whole bunch of pillows between me and her.
Yeah, I
We had
realize
this-
on both
We had
sides.
this big king-size bed, but right at first, I would just have nightmares and I'd swing over and I would hit her, and I wouldn't hit her for the world.
Yeah.
But nightmares will make you do crazy
He still
things.
fights in his sleep.
And to this day, she has those pillows between us, but I said, that's okay. And I'm getting help from the VA.
Good.
They are giving me medicine to take. And one of the doctors I went to, she came up there and she said to me, she says, "Mr. Hipps," she says, "I'm going to give you 3 words." And she says, "I want you to tell me what those 3 words are in about 30 minutes later after the conversation." I said, "Okay, no big deal." So then we kept on talking different things. Then finally, after about 30 minutes, she asked me, she says, "Mr. Hipps, what are those 3 words?" I don't know. I couldn't remember. My wife could remember. And then she asked me a bunch of questions. I knew when I was born, but I don't know when our anniversary is. I don't remember that. And
His memory is fading, but not very, very bad.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like you've got a great memory.
Yeah.
I mean, the way you
Yeah.
recall these,
yeah,
That's what she said.
what you did.
what I went through, yeah.
I want to be sure we get on camera the picture of the article and also your photograph that's in the article. So if you want, however you want to do that. And also, this is the copy of the Newton Citizen, the newspaper that has the article about Mr. Hipps. And then also there's a picture on the front, and then there's a bigger one on the back of Mr. Hipps in uniform. And that picture on the front is when he was 16 years old. And I guess this is the same
Yeah,
same
that's the
picture.
same. I was 16 years old.
And we're going to show another picture in a second. And I'd like you to describe what that picture is. This is the picture in the LST, I believe.
In the landing craft?
Oh, yeah, that was one of the land, I don't know if that was the landing craft I was on or not, but it probably was because, my captain, ended up my colonel, he sent me these pictures. And that was the type of a landing craft that, I came in on after I got off that big ship. And not only that, back when I got out of the military, they had these newsreel programs, and my wife can tell you what happened when her and my sister was watching the newsreel. Tell them, hon.
It was just the old-timey newsreel that you used to see in between the main movie.
Yeah.
And his two sisters and I were sitting in a movie together, watching the movie, and we all three jumped up suddenly when we saw the landing craft you just took a picture of, and we swore we saw him. It was just,
Gosh.
it still makes me have chills to
Oh,
think
I'm
about
sure it does.
But he was there, and he was
Wow.
right in front of us on the newsreel.
Well,
So we were very excited,
yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
I'm
to
sure
see
you
him.
were.
Yeah.
One time,
I wasn't married to him then.
yeah, one time when I was doing carpenter work many years ago, this one guy, he was telling my other buddies on there, he said, it was the Army that came in there and raised a flag on Mount Suribachi. And I forgot his name, and I walked over there to him and I says, you saying something you don't know nothing about. I was there.
Speaking of that, you mentioned that you were with Ira Hayes.
Ira Hayes, yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, Ira Hayes, he was really a lonely person. I mean, he didn't have too much, but we all knew that he had a drinking problem. I went on Liberty one time, but I never went with him because Ira Hayes, he would get drunk. And then, like I said, he was in my company. And he got word that he was going to come to the United States and sell war bonds. That's when America was selling war bonds to get money. And Ira Hayes told my captain, he says, I don't want to go. I won't go. They insisted on him going. He said, well, he says, I'll go, but you got to make sure that I can come back and join my own company. So he went on, Ira Hayes went on home, came back, and I found out later.
Last week you got a letter from your captain.
Yeah, I got a letter from my captain, and it told me that he was really a drunk, that he got into a poker game and got into a fight. I didn't know this. And
Went up on the hill.
yeah, went up on the hill that night, and it was cold, and he died.
Exposure killed him.
He died.
Gosh.
And but he was really a lonely person.
Yeah.
And just like I said, his name was Hayes, my name was Hipps. And I was always right there behind him. I don't care if it's where it was going, food line or whatever, I was always behind him. And the only time I knew another flag raiser, John Bradley, was whenever he doctored me up.
Yeah.
And because well, I knew he was my Navy corpsman. Even in training, we would say, hey, Doc, you know? And there was a few people I knew, but I didn't know a lot of people. And even to this day, if I'm looking through their pictures way back, I can't remember. I don't know what they look like, you know? And I guess nobody can whenever, I can't, whenever, even myself, I don't remember looking like this on this
Well,
paper
it's
here.
65 years.
Yeah.
There are two
Well-
pieces of information that we think are important to have as part of your story, just to show the gravity of this. How many men did you have in your unit when you went on to EO, and how many
Oh.
casualties did you have?
There was 240 men in my company. 27 of us came back, and that is very few. And I don't know to this day how many is left, but this is of the original, the original 240, because we had replacement people coming in. But out of the original 240 men, there was 27 of us that came back, and thank you, God.
And your unit was Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 28th Marine
Yes,
Regiment.
sir. We call it, I've always called it Company E, 2nd Battalion, 28th Marines. And one time, I was giving a speech to the ROTC people up there. There must have been about 20, I guess, or 30 people in there. When I gave the speech, their commander called it Echo Company. And I never heard of Echo Company. And I told him, I said, sir, I said, are you mistaken? I says, it's Easy Company. He says, it might be Easy Company to you, but it's Echo Company. And I did not know that.
It's just over the years, they just changed the way they announced
They
you know,
changed
the
it.
E.
Yeah, the E.
And this was 5th Marine Division, right?
Correct.
5th Marine Division, yes.
Once you were training to invade Japan,
Yes.
then Japan surrendered. Where did you go then?
Where did I go then after I left? I went to, by getting the Purple Heart, I had a total of 50 points. And in order to get discharged, you had to have 50 points. And I got to 50 points because 5 points was given to me by getting a Purple Heart. And then I had to go to Japan. I went to an island called, I don't know the name of it. I forgot the name. I don't know the name of the place in Japan I went to, but I had to go there for duty. I went there and I stayed there, I guess, about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Then I was able to get my discharge. And during those 3 weeks, or 2 weeks, whatever, I had to guard a prison. And I was talking to one of the Japanese guys that was there, and he said he went to school, the university in America. And he said, to tell you the truth, he says the Japanese people did not want the war. That's what amazed me. He says it was the leaders. And so I accepted that, and when I found out that I was going to go home in 2 weeks, I did. So in 2 weeks, after I went there, I got on board ship, came back. You know, I don't remember if I got on board ship or I flew back. I guess it's on board ship. And so then finally, I pulled into San Diego. And then I get my mustering out pay. I think my pay was about $52 a month or something like that. It was very low. And I took all my money, or the biggest part of it, and I sent it home to my mother. I sent it home to my mother because I knew she needed the money. And I only just kept a little part of the allotment for myself because at that time I smoked cigarettes. I smoked the kind of cigarettes I couldn't pronounce. It was Marlboros. I can't even pronounce it to this day.
We never got
And,
more than 3 years.
So then when I got when I got into Miami, I wanted to get rid of my uniform. I went into the YMCA, in which I learned how to swim many, many years ago when I was about 6 or 7 years old. They taught me for $1 dime. And they furnished the towel, and for $1 dime, I learned how to swim. Well, I went in there. Well, first I went to a store that was called Burdine's. I shouldn't have, because it's the most expensive store in Miami, and I didn't know it was the most expensive. And I got myself a jacket, a shirt, and a pair of pants. Then when I went to the YMCA, I went back into the bathroom. I dropped my uniform because I didn't want no part of it. Took my shirt off, took my cap off, took my pants off. laid them on the floor, put my new outfit on, and I chop right on out. My wife never saw me in a
I never
uniform.
saw it.
Really?
She never saw me in a uniform because I never took the liberty because I couldn't afford it.
Speaking of your wife, how long after you got back did you get married?
He was back in January or February, we were married in April.
You didn't let much grass grow, did you?
No, but let me tell you this. My dad, he was something else because I told you that my mother and my grandmother raised me. Well, my dad, he told me, he says, son, he says, when you get married, he says, I want you to come up to New York and work, because he was a chef, high dollar chef in Bayville Beach, Long Island, New York. And he says, I will pay you, I think he said, he says, within 3 months, he says, I will give you about $2,000 that you'll be able to take home. I says, good deal. Good deal. So here I am. Went to New York, me and the wife. She worked as a waitress. Well, she couldn't. She worked at a bar hop, I think, or.
I worked at the ice cream part because
Yeah.
I wasn't old enough
Yeah.
to be where there was alcoholic beverages.
Yeah. So then here I am. Here I am in there. And I told my dad, because he was a head chef, he says, I had to peel potatoes. I says, that's one thing I won't do, peel potatoes. I said, I won't tell you why, but I won't peel potatoes. And then I'm in there, and I'm eating breakfast one morning, putting it away, because remind you now, I went without eating when I was little. If he stayed with us, I probably wouldn't have gone without eating. He came in one day and he told me, he says, son, he says, the big man that owns this restaurant says, I'm eating too much for breakfast. You're going to have to cut down. You're going to have to stop it. Okay? Dad, you know what you can do? You can take this job and shove it. So I go back and I tell the wife, I says, we leaving. I says, I'm not staying here because she says I can't eat. I got to eat very little. So then my wife is crying. My stepmother is crying. And my wife says to me, says, how are we going to get home? And I said, see that thumb? I said, when I was in the military, wherever I'd go, I'd had to hitchhike a ride, So she said, I don't know about that. So I said, we're going to. So we packed our little suitcase. I'm walking out the door. God was with me again. I had a check that came in, my mustard out check from Uncle Sam.
Oh.
It was about $100 and some. And we had to get to New York to the train station. How am I doing pretty good?
You're doing great.
Okay, we go to the train station. We had to get a ride. Somebody took us that worked in the Pick and Whistle. They took us to the train station. And we didn't know how to order anything on a train because I've never been on that kind of a train before. I've been on a troop train before. So they said, what you got to do? I said, what? I said, you sleep on the lower bunk and I'll sleep on the higher bunk. I didn't realize that both of us could have slept on the same bunk on that train. So we had to pay double. And by the time we got home, our money was gone. But then I went out and I got myself a job. I had to work because Uncle Sam says, I want to give you so much money every month. All you got to do is just sit. And I said, I'm not going to sit. I'm going to get a job. So I went down to the unemployment down in Miami, Florida. I went up there and I says, lady, I says, I would like a job. And she says, see that man? He's just going out there right now. He's real tall, walks real fast. He says he wants a bunch of men. So I says, okay. I ran out there. It took me a little bit to catch him because he had long legs and my legs were short, trying to catch up with him. So I asked the man, I says, how about a job? I says, I hear that you hiring men. He says, can you do carpenter work? I said, I don't know nothing about no carpenter work. He says, well, you report to work tomorrow morning. So I reported to work the next morning, and he said to me, he said, I was nailing a whole bunch of nails into the board, and my wrist started squeaking, and I had to quit hammering. And I told him, he said, well, you take my car, and he says, you don't have to nail no more, but you take my car and go all the way from Miami, drive my car all the way from Miami to Coral Gables and pick up a cord. I didn't know what a cord was. I thought a cord was a little old rope, you know. So I get into his, he had a big old Pontiac. And I'm inside, underneath there with these big old concrete pillars. I'm backing up, and man, I couldn't drive, but I didn't let him know it. So I backed up right into the, I put a big dent in his fender. So then I go on all the way to Coral Gables, and I see this rope, this little cord, this little string, yeah. And I brought that string all the way back, and I says, here's your cord. He says, man, that's not a cord, that's string. And he says, electric cord. So he went ahead and he got in his truck, no, a car, and he drove all the way back to Coral Gables, got the cord. Then he started teaching me this and teaching me that, doing carpenter work. And I said, and I was jotting down, I'm supposed to do this, everything is this, everything is that. And so one time he sent me to a house to hang up Venetian blinds. So I go to this house to hang Venetian blinds, and I pull out the Venetian blinds, lay them on the ground, look at the instructions. I can't hang these Venetian blinds, so I had to call him. So then he had to come all the way up there and hang them cords. But he was ended up more or less like being a father to me.
And he kept you working.
And he kept me working. He kept me working all those years, and he
Right.
trained me to be a good builder, a good carpenter.
Okay.
And I ended up being, step outside, hon. I ended up being one of the best.
It's 35 minutes.
I know.
It's 35 minutes next week at 20.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I ended up being a very good builder. And what happened, while I was a good builder, anytime somebody wanted something done, I could do it. And then one time I get a job, I get a chance, a friend of mine told me, I want you to go to Dominican Republic. And I went to Dominican Republic, and I built the first guided missile cable house. We had to dig a big long, I had the natives build a big long, way down 12 feet, a foundation for the guided missile cable house. And I didn't know nothing about building, but after a while, I learned how, and I owed it to that man because he taught me everything.
You had mentioned earlier that you came in contact with James Bradley, who was John Bradley's son
Yes.
at the Atlanta History Center.
Yeah.
Could you describe what happened there?
Yeah, I had somebody call me on the telephone, and when they called me on the telephone, they said, I'm a friend of James Bradley, and he lives someplace around Covington, and he says, James Bradley is going to be at the History Center a certain day, and he told me to keep certain days open so I could come up here and meet him. And I said, I would give anything in the world, love to meet him. So then we waited, we kept those few days open, so finally we got the message. And he came and got us and brought us up here to the History Center. And then while I was in here, I'm sitting down and there was 400 people. I've never seen so many people in my life at the History Center. And so he says, I'm going to give a speech. He says, I'll give a speech. It's going to take about 30 minutes. And if anybody's got any questions and answers, he says, I will answer them after I tell them the story. So then, after he gave his story, several people asked him questions. Then I told my wife, I said, son, I'm close to the aisle. I said, I'm going to scoot out to the edge of the aisle, sit right here and stand up right at the edge of the aisle, and I'm going to get his attention. Okay, So I raised my hand up, and he acknowledged me. I said, "Sir," I said, "I know you are James Bradley, but I want you to know I knew your father. When I got wounded, your father doctored me up and sent me on my way." And and about that time, I told him whenever I was wounded and all that, I have never been applauded before in my life, but the 400 people stood up and they applauded me and made me have the greatest thrill I've ever had in my life. And then he says, furthermore, he says, "I want to sign books, and I want you and your wife to sit at my table while I'm signing books." And I'm sitting at the table with him, very honored, sitting next to him. And then some other people there asked me to sign my name on their books. And I said, "Thank you." And there I was, a little nobody, signing my name on the book. And it gave me a big thrill.
Well, I can tell you, I was at that talk, and there was not a dry eye in that place when people stood up.
Really?
It was very emotional.
Yeah.
Very emotional.
Well, all I said, sir, all I said was what happened. I got wounded, and John Bradley doctored me up with that sulfur. And when I told him I knew his father, and I felt very great of meeting him.
Well, I'm sure it made him feel special too, feel good to meet
Yeah.
you. I want to be sure that everybody else here has a chance to ask any questions. You want to ask Tony or Francis? Or you've been a real help. Is there anything you want to say?
I just wanted to say that John Bradley never, ever talked about the war either. And we read an article about him, that his sons, if the telephone would ring, or his children, he would say, "Tell them I'm going fishing, you don't know when I'm coming back." And that was him.
Yeah.
Until, like he said, about 6 months ago, he never, ever talked about the war. I didn't even know some of this happened.
Well, you've done a real service for all of
Well-
us by talking about it and sharing these stories.
I don't know if I told you, another incident what got me talking was about, did I tell you about my son and his wife was driving
Yeah.
down 20? I think I was telling you that
Well,
before
did that
it was
get on the
on.
tape? No, that did not get on the tape.
Before
That
it
was
was on
before.
tape.
What? Tell us about it now.
My son and his wife left Covington, Georgia on Highway 20, and they was going, I guess, to Atlanta somewhere. I don't know where, Conyers somewhere. And they saw this here old coot that looked about like me, driving this old truck down, and he had a big banner on the back of his truck. And the big banner said, "Iwo Jima survivor." When they said they wanted to stop them, but they couldn't stop them on that highway. And so they came back and they told me about it. And then when they told me about it, I told my wife, I says, "Hon," I says, "I got to get a banner." So I asked my mail carrier, everybody, "Where can I get a banner? On internet or something?" And I said, I couldn't find where to get the banner. So what did I do? Well, I went to Walmart and I saw all these little tiny letters. When I saw these little tiny letters, I made a sign and I stuck it on the back of my truck and car. At that time I had a car and a truck. It said, "Iwo Jima survivor." Whenever I put that sign up there, that's when people started stopping me. They would stop me. If I was stopped at a red light, they would be behind me. They would get out and they would come to the side and they would ask me questions, and they would thank me for doing my duty, serving my country, keeping us in a peaceful place, because if it wasn't guys like me, America today would be under a dictatorship. So then I've been getting all kinds of notes, all kinds of people all over the country wanting a picture of me. And I would give them pictures of the articles, and I would give them my picture, in which I was mighty proud of my picture when I was young. And I'm mighty proud of me now.
Well, you should be.
But I'm a happy person.
Let me ask you a question. As we were walking down, it's not on the tape yet, but you were describing to me kind of how you felt when you heard about Pearl Harbor, and what your reaction was to that. Could you talk about that for
Yeah.
a little bit?
Yeah, I could. Back in the younger days, we would go to a movie theater, and it would only cost us 10 cents to get into the movies. And we would pay the 10 cents, and they would give us an ice cream cone, or they'd give us a lollipop, or they'd give us something for that 10 cents and seeing the movie and the newsreel and the comedy. And so then I don't know, I went ahead and I just,
You saw a newsreel.
yeah, I was in the movie theater and I saw this newsreel. It was in December, whenever they bombed Pearl Harbor. And it shut me up. And during that time, I wasn't even 16 at that time. But then, once I became 16, after seeing all them ships sunk and all them people got killed, it just made me fighting mad. And I quit school in 11th grade. All my sons, my 3 sons, they all got a high school diploma. The wife got a high school diploma. You think I got a high school diploma? No. I could have got a high school diploma, because I tried going back to school when I first got out of the military, and I had no car, had to get on the bus, and married my wife, and I had to, I just couldn't keep it up. I couldn't go to night school and work too, because there wasn't enough hours in a day. So then I never got my high school education. And I thought many a times of writing to my old school and tell them to send me my diploma, because what I did was like a diploma.
Yeah.
But I never did, so I'm happy.
It hasn't hurt you, has it?
It hasn't hurt me.
I want to be sure we get the dates of your military service on the record. Looks like February 3rd, 1943 is when you joined, and
Yes.
January 14th, 1946 is
Yes.
when you separated from the service.
Yes. Yeah, that was then.
Before we wrap this up, I want to just give you the opportunity to say anything else you would like to say about your life, about what you did in the war, what you did before the war, after the war, just anything you want to say.
Okay. What I'd like to say is, when I first married my wife after the war, we came back, and we came back to New York, and we lived with her mother and father. And my wife had a black lady. Her name was Virginia Thompson. She waited on my wife. She did that. She was at my wedding and all that. And then when we came back and lived with her father, back in those days, a black person, a colored person, wouldn't sit at our table to eat. I did not like the idea. Here I am getting ready to eat at this dining room table. She was back there in the kitchen eating, and I said, Virginia, I said, I'm going to tell you something. I'm in the family now. You're not going to stay in that kitchen and eat. You're going to come out here and sit right by me and eat with me, and that's it.
Well,
And
she
from,
raised
and
us.
from then on,
She raised my brother, sister, and I, and she's the best friend I ever had in my life. She lived to be 100 years old. And my daddy was from Georgia, and my my mother, and they were very prejudiced at the time, and the blacks just didn't mix with the white.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's a different story.
Yeah.
But back then, but he just couldn't handle that because she was such a good friend, and she waited on me when I was pregnant, never expected a dime. We tried to help her all we could, giving her food
Yeah.
and bus fare, or took her home, and she was a wonderful part of our life.
Well, you were ahead of your time.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
took her places where she's never been. There was a place down there in, on the other side of Miami called
City.
Coral City. This old man built the Coral Castle. He built everything. He was able to, he amazed, it's a wonder of the world. He built these here big stones. People to this day don't know how he was able to put these stones together. I took her there. And I also, whenever we went to Georgia or Jacksonville, we would ask her to go, and she would go with us. And we treated her so great. We went to her funeral, and she lived, like my wife said, she lived a good, ripe age. And things like that made me a good person today. And I'll always be a good person.
Well, it's obvious to us you're a good person, and you've got a good wife,
He's
Yeah.
tried.
Good family, and-
He's always tried.
I mean, this has been a real honor for all of us to be able to
Why
meet you.
don't you just tell us about your family a little bit? I mean, I know you mentioned you had 3
Our
sons.
family, well, we have 3 sons, and total grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and step-grandchildren is 22. We have a big, big family. We have a special little boy he's 11 now, and we practically raised him since he's 3.5 months old, with my son and his wife on the skating rink in Covington, Georgia. And Michael stayed with us most of the time. And he just called me 5 minutes ago. He said, please come by and pick me up if you're about finished. So that I told him we'd be finished and be there to get him. And they're all wonderful children, all wonderful sons. 2 of them one of them was in a secret something in Vietnam that he said he can't even talk about it to this day. The other one was in preventive medicine, and he saw some horrors. And he said that one day he saw this little child with one arm. They would use children, little children, as booby traps to try to kill the soldiers over there. And he said he just picked her up, put him in his arms, and sat down on the curb. He said, if I get blown up, I gotta hold this child, and he held that child. So they've been through an awful lot too, and they are like their dad. They're going to the VA for post-traumatic stress. And the other one was on his way to go to Vietnam also, and he was out in Kansas, and his wife couldn't handle military life, and he got an honorable discharge and didn't have to go. And I was about to the point I was ready to fight whoever I had to fight to keep not having 3 over there at the same time. So they're wonderful, all of them, and we're very, very fortunate. And like I tell him many times, he's such a good grandparent to this little 11-year-old. I said, you're his playmate, and God had a reason to keep you alive, and it must have been Michael, because Michael keeps us alive. He keeps us going. He won't if he doesn't walk, he'll say, Dr. Holland told you walk, you need exercise. And he's just one that is always there for us.
But I would like to also mention, talking about my family, when my sons, they was perfect all of their life until they became 15, 16.
That's the danger age.
And when they became 15 and 16, one of my sons became a hippie.
Oh, yeah.
And the woman that he married, she was a hippie too. And my son, and here I am, military man, ex-military man. I'm sitting at the table, and my son, he had this big old beard, long hair, dressed like a hippie. His wife dressed like a hippie. And a piece of food was on his beard. And I said, son, I says, this, you dropped food on your beard. So he says, I'll save it and eat it for later. Man, I hated that, and here I am, a military man. I think I pushed him off the table.
No, you turned the table upside
Well, I
down.
turned the table upside down because I did not like the idea of being a hippie, because hippie people was on drugs and all that other stuff. But he turned to Christ. And that changed him, and he will preach in church once in a while, and all of my sons are terrific now. But boy, I'll tell you, for 2 days, when they was
Years.
those years, we almost left one another because
They
it was
had
hard.
Marijuana, they didn't have any hard drugs, but they were a handful back in those days, in the 60s.
Yeah, those teenage times are tough to get through,
Yeah.
particularly back.
Yeah,
No,
Yeah.
they were
But we
very
made it.
hard.
Good.
They were hard to get through. But they're wonderful men now, and we're real proud of all of them, and our grandchildren too. But you know, some reason, somehow, you have one special.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more special than the rest. And I don't know why, but this one is. And he shows his appreciation, and he's just there for us. And a lot of times, everybody says he's the one that's keeping you alive. He won't let us just sit down and do nothing.
Well, they're lucky to have parents and grandparents like the two of y'all.
But
And,
we feel that way too, because we have always tried to do, our family is the most important thing in our lives. We don't socialize, we don't go out a lot, but if we're with our family and be with them, that's all we need.
well, I'd like to tell you also that I feel very honored of y'all inviting me and having me here, because makes me feel great, you know.
And he's doing better, his memory is a little bit gone, but not bad.
I don't think your memory's gone at all. I mean,
No.
we're amazed at what you
Yeah.
could tell us today, and I mean, to us, you're a hero. And I
And-
know you probably don't think you are, but you really are a hero for what you
And
do.
I didn't have to read any of this, did I?
No, you didn't.
You didn't.
Well, our oldest grandson on our 60th anniversary took he and I back to Washington DC as our anniversary gift. And he went to see the monuments, which was a great thrill for him. And while he was there, and we were at the statue of raising the flag on Iwo Jima, busloads of young students came, and they took his autograph, wanted to know and talk to him. And my grandson's wife said, "You want to meet a real hero? Here he is. Come talk to him."
Well,
And he talked to him, and he was thrilled to death with that too.
and we agree that
And-
you're a real hero, and we can't tell you how much we appreciate your service to our country
Thank you very
and
much.
the kind of life you lived and are still living, and the person you are.
I have one grandson, he's living in Orlando now. He used to live here. The one that took us to Washington DC on our 50th anniversary. And I gave him my Purple Heart, and I gave him my medals, and I gave him my Marine stuff.
Good.
And because he was the one that really stood out, that was very interested in all this. And him and his wife was after me for a long time
To do just what you
to write my story, tell my story, and so I told my story.
Well, we're glad you did, and all I can say is we're honored to know you.
Okay.
And thank you so much.